In today's video, we examine the most terrifying animal attacks ever recorded. From a senior zookeeper approaching a grizzly's enclosure with buckets of salmon to a lawyer at the edge of a narrow channel known for its massive alligators. It was September 15, 2019, at the Montana grizzly encounter in Bozeman, Montana, when a routine evening feeding turned into a nightmare that would shock the wildlife community forever. The 200-acre bear sanctuary, nestled in the Gallatin Valley, with the Bridger Mountains creating a dramatic backdrop, was winding down for the day as autumn temperatures dropped to a crisp 45 degrees. The facility, home to rescued grizzly bears unable to survive in the wild, maintained strict safety protocols that had kept staff safe for over 2 decades. Erica Dalton, a 34-year-old senior zookeeper with 12 years of impeccable service, was conducting her final rounds in the restricted keeper area behind the grizzly exhibit. Known throughout the facility for her meticulous attention to safety protocols and genuine care for the animals, Erica had built a reputation as someone who never cut corners when it came to proper procedures. Her colleague Marcus Webb, a 29-year-old junior keeper with 3 years of service, followed behind carrying additional feed supplies for the evening meal. However, beneath Marcus's helpful exterior lurked deep resentment that had been festering for months. 3 formal write-ups from Erica for safety violations had cost him a recent promotion to assistant supervisor, and his bitterness toward her had grown increasingly toxic. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head veterinarian who had worked at the sanctuary for 8 years, had specifically recommended Erica over Marcus for the senior position, citing her unwavering commitment to proper procedures and natural leadership abilities. The American grizzly bear stands as one of North America's most formidable predators, a subspecies of brown bear that commands both fear and respect. Adult males can weigh up to 800 pounds and possess incredible strength, with the ability to run 35 miles per hour despite their massive size and deliver bone-crushing blows with their massive paws equipped with 4-inch claws. Their jaws generate a bite force of over 1,200 pounds per square inch, while their 2-inch canine teeth can penetrate through thick hide and bone with devastating efficiency. Grizzlies are naturally territorial animals and become extremely aggressive when surprised, threatened, or defending their food sources. In captivity, these bears maintain their wild instincts and can be unpredictable, especially during feeding times when their predatory behaviors are most pronounced. As Erica approached the 12-foot-high reinforced steel enclosure, carrying 2 buckets of fresh salmon weighing 30 pounds each, she turned her back on Marcus to unlock the complex feeding gate mechanism. The gate system required a specific sequence of locks to be disengaged, a safety measure designed to prevent accidental entry. In that moment of trust and routine, Marcus made his fatal move. With both hands placed firmly on her back, he shoved Erica with tremendous force through the partially opened gate directly into the territory of Kodiak, a 400-pound male grizzly who had been pacing near the feeding area. Erica landed face down on the concrete floor near the bear's established feeding area, the salmon buckets clattering loudly as they spilled their contents, immediately triggering the animal's defensive instincts. Kodiak charged without hesitation, his massive frame covering the 15-foot distance in mere seconds with surprising speed. His massive jaws clamped down on Erica's left shoulder with devastating force, the impact audible even from outside the enclosure. The bear's 2-inch canine teeth punctured through her thick khaki uniform and penetrated deep into her chest cavity, puncturing her left lung and causing immediate internal bleeding. Erica's shoulder blade cracked audibly under the immense pressure as Kodiak lifted her entire body from the ground and shook her violently from side to side, his powerful neck muscles allowing him to manipulate her 130-pound frame effortlessly. The grizzly released his initial grip only to deliver a crushing blow with his right paw across Erica's torso, the impact equivalent to being struck by a sledgehammer. The devastating strike broke 4 ribs on her right side and sent her sprawling across the concrete floor of the enclosure. Blood began pooling rapidly beneath her as internal bleeding commenced from the punctured lung, damaged liver, and multiple organ trauma caused by the broken ribs. Kodiak approached for his final attack, his predatory instincts now fully engaged, and and viewing Erica as both threat and prey. His massive jaws closed around Erica's skull with tremendous force, the crushing pressure immediately fracturing her temporal bone and compressing vital brain tissue. Within 90 seconds of entering the enclosure, Erica Dalton was dead from massive head trauma, internal bleeding, and multiple organ failure. The Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department launched an immediate investigation into the incident, with detectives arriving within hours. Marcus Webb was arrested the following morning and charged with first-degree murder, though he maintained throughout questioning that the push was accidental. The Montana grizzly encounter temporarily suspended all operations pending a comprehensive safety review. It was August 25th, 2018, in Calgary, Alberta. The late summer sun lit the zoo grounds, families walking slowly between shaded exhibits as the day warmed. The grizzly bear enclosure, one of the Calgary Zoo's most popular attractions, was scheduled for a quiet enrichment session before opening fully to the public, but would not open that day due to something horrific. Derek Wallace was 36, a keeper who had been at the zoo for nearly a decade. His specialty was large mammals, bears, bison, and other species that required both strength and calmness from handlers. Colleagues described him as disciplined and dependable, someone who prided himself on doing the difficult work safely. He rarely cut corners, but he carried a confidence that sometimes translated into moving a step too quickly, assuming procedures would hold as they always had. Visitors often saw him giving talks near the bear exhibit, explaining their biology with steady, matter-of-fact delivery. Outside of work, Wallace lived a quiet life. He kept a modest apartment, spent time running trails near the Bow River, and was known among friends as someone who avoided risks outside of his job. His dedication to the animals was his main drive. That morning, his goal was straightforward: prepare the outdoor yard with enrichment objects, logs, toys, and food scents, so the bears could be released later to stimulate natural foraging behavior. The task was routine, one he had performed countless times. His decision to step inside, believing both bears were secured, was not reckless in his eyes, only another repetition of standard work. The grizzly enclosure sat on the eastern side of the zoo, a broad yard of dirt, grass, and scattered boulders, with a stream flowing through the middle. The air carried the faint smell of hay and damp soil. From the public gallery above, families could look down into the enclosure, where the two adult grizzlies, a male weighing over 600 pounds and a slightly smaller female, were housed. Grizzly bears are among the largest predators in North America, with adult males standing over 7 feet on their hind legs and equipped with claws 4 inches long. Their bite force can exceed 1,200 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bone. Though captive-born, their behavior remains rooted in instinct. Food, territory, and dominance determine their reactions. Keepers are trained to avoid direct contact entirely, relying on secured gates and shift procedures to move animals safely. Earlier that week, one gate between the indoor holding and the outer yard had been sticking slightly, requiring extra effort to latch fully. Staff noted it, planning to repair it during routine maintenance. On that morning, another keeper stood nearby, observing as Wallace entered, but from her angle she could not clearly see if the latch had engaged. Wallace, trusting the system, carried the enrichment objects inside without pause. At first, everything was calm. He walked across the dirt yard, setting down a toy against a boulder and scattering scents to encourage foraging. Families had already begun to gather at the gallery, watching with mild interest, though the bears themselves were expected to be inside. Then movement came from the rear gate. A heavy shape surged forward, fur brushing the metal as the male grizzly burst into the yard. The gate, not fully secured, had swung open under the animal's weight. The bear struck Wallace from behind with both forepaws. The impact drove him face first into the dirt, knocking the wind from his lungs. The sound of the hit was described by one witness as like a body slamming into wet sand. Wallace barely had time to move before the animal clamped down on his shoulder, claws tearing into his back. He cried out, muffled by the ground, as the grizzly raked its claws down his arms and sides. Dirt and blood mixed beneath him. The animal flipped him over with startling ease, jaws locking onto his torso. Visitors on the gallery screamed, some pulling children away, others frozen in place as the bear shook him violently. Keepers rushed to distract the animal, throwing food and banging metal, while others deployed high-pressure hoses through the barriers. The grizzly remained locked on. Wallace's body jerked with each bite, his legs twitching briefly before going still. The bear pressed its weight down, claws sinking into his abdomen. The struggle lasted under 2 minutes, though to those watching it stretched unbearably long. Staff finally managed to draw the bear back toward the holding area with food, slamming the gate shut once it crossed. They immediately called for paramedics. Wallace lay motionless, his uniform shredded, arms bent unnaturally. Medics entered within moments, but the damage was irreparable. He had suffered catastrophic trauma, deep lacerations across his torso, broken ribs, and severe blood loss. He was pronounced dead at the scene. His funeral days later was quiet, attended by family, co-workers, and a handful of longtime zoo visitors who knew him by name. There was no media spectacle, only a recognition among colleagues that familiarity with dangerous animals can create blind spots. Canadian authorities required the zoo to suspend bear demonstrations and revise handling procedures. The pair of grizzlies were kept out of public view for months, their yard reinforced and gate systems inspected thoroughly. It was June 8, 2020, in the vast wetlands of Big Cypress National Preserve, Florida, where private swampland stretches for miles through sawgrass prairies and cypress domes. The remote backcountry waterways, accessible only by airboat or shallow draft vessels, harbor some of America's largest alligator populations. During the peak of mating season, territorial male alligators become increasingly aggressive, defending prime nesting areas along muddy banks and shallow channels. The humid air hung thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and stagnant water. Keith Renshaw, a 35-year-old freelance wildlife photographer from Denver, had spent the last 3 years struggling to establish himself in the competitive nature photography market. His recent divorce had left him financially strained, desperately needing a breakthrough assignment to secure a potential contract with National Geographic. Keith's perfectionist personality and growing arrogance had led him to take increasingly dangerous risks for unique shots that other photographers wouldn't attempt. He had hired Jake Morrison, a local Seminole guide with decades of swamp experience, for an exclusive tour of restricted backcountry areas known for trophy-sized alligators. Keith's dismissive attitude toward local expertise and his obsession with capturing the perfect shot had already caused tension during their morning expedition. The preserve's waterways were experiencing peak alligator activity due to the June breeding season. Morrison had warned Keith repeatedly about the heightened aggression of territorial males, but the photographer's determination to capture dramatic images overshadowed his caution. They had spotted several large bulls throughout the day, but Keith remained unsatisfied with the distance and lighting conditions for his shots. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds, with bite forces measuring nearly 3,000 pounds per square inch. During mating season, territorial bulls become extremely aggressive, defending prime nesting sites and responding violently to any perceived intrusion. Their powerful tails can propel them through water at speeds up to 25 miles per hour, while their explosive launch from water to land can cover distances of 6 feet vertically. Despite their bulky appearance, alligators possess lightning-fast reflexes and can remain motionless for hours before striking with devastating speed. At 3:45 p.m., Keith spotted a massive 12-foot bull alligator sunning on a muddy bank near a narrow channel. The reptile's scarred hide and impressive girth indicated an old, dominant male defending prime territory. Morrison immediately recognized the danger signs. The alligator's elevated position on the bank and its alert posture suggested heightened territorial awareness. Despite urgent warnings from his guide, Keith insisted on approaching closer for better photographic angles. Keith slowly waded into the murky water, his expensive camera equipment held high above the surface. The water reached his waist as he moved within 6 feet of the massive reptile, which remained motionless except for its eyes tracking his movement. Morrison shouted warnings from the boat, but Keith dismissed them as overcautious local superstition. The attack came without warning. The 12-foot bull exploded from the bank with terrifying speed, his massive body launching through the air before crashing into the water. His enormous jaws snapped shut around Keith's torso just below his ribcage, the 80 razor-sharp teeth puncturing through his abdomen and lower chest. The initial bite force of nearly 3,000 psi crushed several ribs and punctured his liver and stomach, causing immediate internal bleeding. The death roll began instantly. The alligator spun violently in the water, using his powerful tail and body weight to disorient his victim. Keith's body rotated helplessly as the spinning motion tore muscles and ligaments while forcing muddy water into his mouth and nose. The crushing pressure of the jaws compressed his internal organs as his ribs cracked audibly with each rotation. After 4 complete 360-degree spins, the alligator's grip shifted, allowing more water to flood Keith's airways. The massive reptile then began dragging Keith toward deeper water, maintaining his crushing grip while Keith's consciousness faded from oxygen deprivation. The muddy swamp water filled his lungs as he remained trapped in the alligator's jaws. Unable to surface or breathe, his struggles grew weaker as drowning combined with massive internal trauma from the crushing bite. The alligator held him underwater for nearly 3 minutes, ensuring his prey was completely subdued before releasing the lifeless body. Keith's body floated to the surface, showing extensive crush injuries across his torso and abdomen. The alligator's teeth had left deep puncture wounds, while the death roll had caused severe internal damage to his organs and skeletal structure. However, the primary cause of death was drowning, as swamp water had completely filled his lungs during the prolonged underwater struggle. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols for guided tours in alligator habitats during breeding season. It was March 8, 2016, and the Miami evening was warm and humid, with the scent of jasmine and chlorine hanging heavy in the air around Carlos Mendez's Coral Gables mansion. The sprawling property featured a main house, guest quarters, and an elaborate backyard compound that housed his illegal collection of exotic animals. Hidden from neighbors by high walls and dense vegetation, the compound contained several custom-built pools where Carlos kept his prized alligators. Carlos Mendez was 34 and had built his fortune through a combination of legitimate business ventures and activities that existed in legal gray areas. His import-export company provided cover for various schemes, and his wealth allowed him to indulge in expensive hobbies that most people could never afford. His passion was collecting dangerous animals, particularly alligators, which he kept in violation of numerous local and federal laws. For 5 years, Carlos had been hand-feeding his alligators, taking pride in his ability to work with these prehistoric predators without formal training. He'd gradually acquired larger and more dangerous animals, including Diablo, an 8-foot male American alligator that weighed nearly 300 pounds. Carlos genuinely believed his experience made him an expert handler, despite having no scientific understanding of reptile behavior. That evening, Carlos was entertaining Maria, a woman he'd been dating for several weeks. He'd been drinking heavily throughout dinner, and his judgment was impaired by both alcohol and his desire to impress her with his fearless handling of dangerous animals. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. They can grow up to 14 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with bite forces exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch, among the strongest of any living animal. Alligators are ambush predators with lightning-fast reflexes, capable of launching themselves from the water with explosive force. Diablo was Carlos's prize specimen, captured from the Everglades as a juvenile and raised in captivity for 8 years. Despite years of regular feeding, the alligator retained all his wild instincts and had never developed any tolerance for human presence. The 300-pound predator spent most of his time motionless in his custom pool, but his prehistoric brain was constantly alert for feeding opportunities. Carlos led Maria to Diablo's enclosure, a concrete pool surrounded by decorative landscaping. The alligator floated motionlessly in the center of the pool, only his eyes and nostrils visible above the dark water. Against his usual protocol and influenced by alcohol, Carlos decided to hand-feed Diablo instead of using the long feeding pole he normally employed. He wanted to show Maria how fearless he was, how completely he'd mastered these dangerous animals. Carlos knelt at the edge of the pool, holding a whole chicken just above the water's surface. Diablo's prehistoric eyes tracked the movement, his brain calculating distance and timing with predatory precision. The alligator began moving toward the food with slow, deliberate strokes of his powerful tail. Diablo positioned himself directly below the offered chicken, his massive jaws just inches from Carlos's outstretched hand. The alligator's feeding response was triggered by the proximity of the meat, and millions of years of evolution took over. Diablo launched himself from the water with explosive force, his jaws opening wide to reveal rows of conical teeth. But instead of grabbing just the chicken, Diablo's massive jaws clamped down on Carlos's entire forearm. The alligator's bite force crushed bone and severed arteries instantly, while his momentum dragged Carlos into the pool. Maria's screams echoed across the compound as Carlos disappeared beneath the dark water. Diablo began the death roll that made his species so deadly, spinning his massive body in the water while maintaining his grip on Carlos's arm. The rotational force generated tremendous torque, tearing Carlos's arm from his body while the alligator's weight held him underwater. Carlos's struggles grew weaker as drowning and blood loss overwhelmed his system. The death roll continued for nearly a minute, with Carlos's body being twisted and torn by forces no human could survive. Diablo's prehistoric instincts were fully engaged, and he showed no intention of releasing his prey until the feeding process was complete. Maria had called 911, but by the time emergency responders arrived, only pieces of Carlos remained floating in the bloodied water. Diablo had retreated to the far end of the pool, showing no unusual aggression toward the rescue team. Carlos was pronounced dead at the scene, though little remained of his body after Diablo's assault. The investigation revealed his illegal exotic animal collection and led to criminal charges against several associates involved in the smuggling operation. Diablo was euthanized by wildlife officials, along with the other alligators in Carlos's collection. The incident sparked renewed efforts to crack down on illegal exotic animal ownership in South Florida. Carlos's funeral was a small affair, attended mainly by family members who had long worried about his dangerous hobbies. It was April 12, 2016, in Dallas, Texas. The morning was cool and overcast, the zoo grounds still quiet before the flow of visitors. The routine of animal care unfolded as it had countless times before, with keepers moving between enclosures in practiced rhythm. But within the lion habitat, a small lapse in procedure would turn a familiar task into tragedy. Eva Goggins was 62, a senior zookeeper who had spent over 3 decades at the Dallas Zoo. She was widely respected among colleagues for her steady presence, a woman who rarely lost her composure even under pressure. Eva had begun working at the zoo in her 20s, rising to a trusted position where she trained younger keepers. Her reputation was built not on innovation, but on dependability. Staff leaned on her for guidance, and she carried a quiet pride in knowing the animals well, especially the big cats. Though careful by nature, Eva had grown accustomed to routines that dulled the edge of caution. Years of experience gave her confidence that she could judge the moods and patterns of the lions she cared for. However, she sometimes skipped formal steps to save time, convinced that her familiarity and instincts were enough. Her goal that morning was simple: clear debris and inspect part of the enclosure before visitors arrived. She believed the lions were secure behind barriers, as they usually were during cleaning. That belief, though, rested more on habit than on confirmation. The lion exhibit stretched with sandy soil, scattered rocks, and a broad viewing area beyond the reinforced glass for the public. Artificial trees and shaded outcroppings gave cover to the cats. In the early morning light, the stillness concealed the latent power of predators built for ambush. African lions, especially adult males, can weigh over 400 pounds, with a bite force exceeding 600 pounds per square inch. They are ambush hunters by design, often staying motionless in cover before launching sudden attacks. Though born in captivity, zoo lions retain the same predatory instincts. Keepers are trained never to enter enclosures with them unsecured, as even a moment of direct contact can prove fatal. Warnings were present. Eva's two younger co-workers later admitted they had seen the male lion lingering near the rear rock outcropping, restless before Eva entered. They assumed she knew where the animal was positioned. Protocol called for the lions to be locked into a separate holding area before any keeper stepped inside. But Eva bypassed the step, considering the inspection too brief to require it. Her colleagues hesitated to correct her, deferring to her seniority. The oversight would prove irreversible. Eva moved slowly along the ground, collecting fallen branches and checking the fence line. Her focus was on the debris, not on scanning for the animal. Behind her, the lion shifted, emerging silently from the rocks. Her co-workers, watching from outside the locked gate, noticed too late. By the time they shouted, the lion had already lunged. The impact was immediate and violent. The lion slammed Eva against the wall of the enclosure, knocking the breath from her. Before she could recover, the animal's jaws clamped down across her neck and shoulder, driving her to the ground. Witnesses outside saw her body convulse as the lion maintained the crushing hold, its weight pressing her into the sand. Eva's arms flailed briefly as she tried to push against the lion's chest. The claws raked across her torso, tearing through her uniform, leaving deep parallel gashes that bled heavily onto the sand. Her co-workers banged on the bars with tools, their voices breaking as they screamed for help. The lion dragged Eva several feet. Her legs kicked weakly before slowing, movement fading under the suffocating pressure at her throat. The staff emergency response was rapid but insufficient against the animal's speed. A tranquilizer dart was fired from outside, striking the lion's flank, but the drug would take minutes to act. Someone phoned for an ambulance, but Eva had already sustained catastrophic blood loss. The lion finally released her, circling briefly before retreating back toward the rocks. The scene left her colleagues in shock. Staff members rushed in once the lion weakened from the tranquilizer, but Eva showed no signs of life. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and the body was removed quietly, shielded from early visitors who had not yet reached the area. Investigators later documented deep puncture wounds consistent with the lion's canines, along with claw marks across her torso. The coroner's report later confirmed Eva died from massive hemorrhage and airway crushing caused by the lion's bite to the neck. The funeral was subdued, attended by family, colleagues, and a small group of zoo staff who had worked alongside her for years. Media coverage was limited to local outlets, presenting the event as a tragic workplace accident rather than a spectacle. At the zoo, the lion exhibit was closed for weeks. The animals moved off public display. New policies reinforced the prohibition on solo entry into carnivore enclosures, rules that Eva herself had once emphasized to younger keepers. It was March 15, 2019, in the lush hills surrounding Chiang Mai, Thailand, where dozens of unregulated wildlife sanctuaries operate in the shadows of legitimate conservation efforts. The Tiger Paradise Sanctuary, a small facility nestled between dense jungle and rice paddies, marketed itself as an authentic wildlife experience for adventurous tourists. Unlike accredited zoos, this establishment allowed direct contact with adult tigers for premium fees, capitalizing on visitors' desire for extraordinary social media content. The humid tropical air carried the scent of jasmine and tiger musk, while the distant sounds of motorbikes on rural roads mixed with occasional roars from the enclosures. Amber Whitfield, a 28-year-old social media manager from Sydney, had built a modest following of 4,200 Instagram followers by documenting her Southeast Asian backpacking adventure. Working for a small travel company back home, she understood the power of compelling visual content. Her competitive nature drove her to seek increasingly daring experiences that would set her apart from other travel bloggers. After reading mixed reviews about Tiger Paradise, she specifically chose this sanctuary because it offered the closest contact with tigers available in the region. The facility's promise of private photo sessions with adult Bengal tigers was exactly what she needed for her content strategy. Her previous posts from elephant sanctuaries and snake farms had generated significant engagement, fueling her desire for even more dramatic content. The sanctuary housed 12 tigers in concrete enclosures surrounded by basic chain-link fencing. Warning signs in broken English advised visitors to maintain distance, but enforcement was minimal. Staff members, mostly local workers with little formal training in animal behavior, prioritized customer satisfaction over safety protocols. The facility's main attraction was Raja, a 400-pound male Bengal tiger rescued from illegal captivity as a cub but never properly socialized. His massive orange coat bore the distinctive black stripes that made him particularly photogenic, explaining why tourists specifically requested sessions with him. Bengal tigers are apex predators capable of taking down prey weighing over 1,000 pounds. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp canine teeth can reach lengths of 2 inches. Despite their massive size, tigers can accelerate from 0 to 35 miles per hour in just a few strides. Their hunting instincts remain intact even in captivity, triggered by sudden movements, direct eye contact, or prey-like behavior from humans. Even hand-raised tigers retain their predatory programming, making them unpredictable around humans regardless of their apparent docility. Amber's private session with Raja began at 2:30 p.m. in a concrete enclosure measuring roughly 30 by 40 feet. The tiger appeared calm, lying in the shade near the back wall, while Amber maintained the recommended 10-foot distance. As she grew more confident, she gradually moved closer, encouraged by Raja's seemingly docile demeanor. The untrained staff member supervising the session failed to recognize the subtle signs of the tiger's increasing alertness, his ears rotating forward and his tail beginning to twitch. When Amber turned her back to Raja and extended her phone for a selfie, she unknowingly triggered the predator's hunting instincts. The massive tiger exploded into motion with terrifying speed, covering the distance between them in less than 2 seconds. His powerful hind legs propelled him forward in one fluid leap, his front paws extended and claws fully deployed. Raja's jaws clamped down on the back of Amber's neck with surgical precision. His 2-inch canine teeth penetrated between her cervical vertebrae, severing her spinal cord at the C2 level. The crushing force of his bite completely fractured her second cervical vertebra, causing immediate paralysis from the neck down. The tiger's massive jaw pressure compressed her carotid arteries and jugular veins, cutting off blood flow to her brain within seconds. The attack lasted less than 10 seconds. Raja's bite severed Amber's brainstem, causing instant unconsciousness and respiratory failure. Her nervous system shut down immediately, preventing any pain sensation from reaching her brain. The tiger released his grip and stepped back, his predatory instincts satisfied by the successful kill. Amber's body collapsed to the concrete floor, her phone still clutched in her right hand, the intended selfie never captured. Staff members rushed into the enclosure within minutes, but Amber showed no signs of life. Her neck displayed massive trauma from the tiger's bite, with deep puncture wounds marking where the canine teeth had penetrated. A complete severing of her spinal cord had caused immediate death, with no possibility of survival even with immediate medical intervention. Thai authorities launched an investigation into the facility's safety protocols and licensing status. The Tiger Paradise Sanctuary was temporarily closed, pending review of its animal handling procedures. Amber's family released a brief statement requesting privacy while they processed the tragic loss of their adventurous daughter. It was July 22, 2021, at Seal Island near Mossel Bay, South Africa, when what should have been a routine research dive turned into a nightmare that would haunt the marine biology community forever. The rocky outcrop, located 8 kilometers offshore in the frigid waters of the Atlantic Ocean, serves as home to over 60,000 Cape Fur seals during breeding season. The island's strategic position in Shark Alley makes it one of the world's premier locations for great white shark research and cage diving operations. Summer temperatures had warmed the surface waters to 18 degrees Celsius, creating optimal conditions for both seal activity and the apex predators that hunt them. Lindsay Hartman, a 28-year-old marine biology graduate student from the University of Cape Town, had arrived at Seal Island to conduct her thesis research on great white shark feeding behavior during peak season. Known for her overconfident attitude and thrill-seeking personality, Lindsay often pushed boundaries that more experienced researchers respected. Her academic brilliance was matched only by her reckless disregard for established safety protocols. Captain Tom Morrison, a 52-year-old veteran of the shark cage diving industry, operated the research vessel through his company White Shark Diving Company. His 20-year safety record was impeccable, but declining tourism due to recent shark attacks had put enormous financial pressure on his business. Jake Stevens, Lindsay's 24-year-old ex-boyfriend and the boat's dive master, harbored deep resentment following their bitter breakup 3 months earlier. Jake's responsibilities included cage maintenance and pre-dive safety checks, duties he had performed flawlessly for 2 years. However, his recent drinking problem and public comments about Lindsay getting what she deserves had raised concerns among the crew. The great white shark represents the ocean's most perfectly evolved killing machine, an apex predator that has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Adult females can reach lengths of 20 feet and weigh over 5,000 pounds, though the average specimen measures 12 to 16 feet and weighs between 1,500 to 2,400 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are designed for explosive bursts of speed, capable of reaching 35 miles per hour when attacking prey from below. Great whites possess rows of razor-sharp triangular teeth, each measuring up to 3 inches in length and designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Their bite force can exceed 4,000 pounds per square inch, among the strongest recorded in the animal kingdom. These sharks are ambush predators that rely on surprise attacks, often approaching from the depths to strike prey at the surface. Great whites are naturally curious but extremely unpredictable, making any encounter potentially fatal. Lindsay descended 20 feet below the surface in the standard aluminum shark cage, equipped with scuba gear and underwater camera equipment for documenting feeding behavior. The cage measured 8 feet long by 4 feet wide, with reinforced steel bars spaced 6 inches apart to prevent shark entry while allowing clear observation. Unknown to Lindsay, Jake had deliberately loosened the door latch mechanism during his pre-dive inspection, his resentment finally overcoming professional judgment. The cage was positioned directly above a seal colony feeding area, with chunks of tuna and seal blood creating a powerful chum slick to attract sharks. Within minutes, a 16-foot female great white, weighing approximately 2,200 pounds, approached the cage, drawn by the scent trail and movement in the water. The massive predator circled the cage twice before making direct contact, her powerful body bumping against the aluminum structure with tremendous force. The impact caused the loosened door latch to fail completely, creating a 3-foot opening on the cage's front panel. The great white immediately detected the breach and thrust her massive head through the opening, her jaws gaping wide to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Lindsay was positioned directly in front of the opening, making escape impossible in the confined space. The shark's upper jaw clamped down on Lindsay's left thigh with devastating force, her triangular teeth slicing through the thick neoprene wetsuit and penetrating deep into muscle tissue. The bite severed Lindsay's femoral artery, causing immediate and catastrophic blood loss. The great white's powerful neck muscles allowed her to shake Lindsay violently within the confined cage space, the motion tearing additional muscle tissue and expanding the wound. Blood began clouding the water rapidly as Lindsay's life force poured from the severed artery. The shark released her initial grip only to attack again, this time clamping down on Lindsay's pelvis with bone-crushing force. The second bite fractured Lindsay's pelvic bone and compressed vital organs, causing massive internal trauma. The great white's teeth penetrated through to her spine, severing nerve pathways and causing immediate paralysis of her lower body. Within 2 minutes of the cage breach, Lindsay Hartman had bled out underwater, her body going limp as her heart stopped pumping. The South African Maritime Safety Authority launched an immediate investigation into the cage failure, focusing on equipment maintenance and safety protocols. Jake Stevens was arrested and charged with culpable homicide after admitting to tampering with the cage latch. White Shark Diving Company faced multiple lawsuits and eventually ceased operations. It was June 22, 2014, and the Detroit summer night was sweltering, with temperatures still in the 80s despite the late hour. In an abandoned warehouse district on the city's east side, Damon Jackson's urban compound buzzed with the kind of activity that thrived in darkness. The converted building served as headquarters for his drug operation, complete with reinforced doors, security cameras, and a basement that housed his most prized possession, Leo, an African lion. Damon Jackson was 28 and had built his reputation on fear and intimidation. Known on the streets as D-Money, he controlled several blocks of territory through a combination of violence and psychological warfare. The lion was his ultimate status symbol, a 350-pound predator that commanded respect from rivals and customers alike. Few people knew that Leo existed, but those who did understood that crossing Damon could have deadly consequences. Damon had purchased Leo illegally from a black market dealer 2 years earlier, keeping the lion in a makeshift cage in his basement. The conditions were deplorable. A concrete cell barely large enough for the animal to stand and turn around, with poor ventilation and irregular feeding. Damon had no understanding of big cat behavior or nutritional needs, viewing Leo as nothing more than a living weapon. That night, Damon had been celebrating a successful drug deal with cocaine and alcohol, his judgment impaired by substances and his inflated ego. Several associates were present, and Damon decided to show off by entering Leo's cage to demonstrate his fearless control over the dangerous predator. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts, regardless of captivity conditions. Adult males can weigh up to 500 pounds and possess bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch. When malnourished and stressed, as Leo certainly was, they become even more unpredictable and dangerous. Leo had been living in deplorable conditions for 2 years, fed irregularly and kept in isolation that had driven him to the edge of madness. The 350-pound lion was severely underweight, his ribs visible through his dull coat. Chronic stress and malnutrition had made him hyper-aggressive and unpredictable, viewing any human presence as either a threat or potential prey. Damon descended into the basement with his entourage, the group's laughter and loud voices echoing off the concrete walls. Leo paced restlessly in his cramped cage, his yellow eyes tracking the approaching humans with predatory intensity. The lion's ears were flattened against his skull, and low growls rumbled from his chest, clear warning signs that Damon was too intoxicated to recognize. Against the protests of his associates, Damon unlocked Leo's cage and stepped inside, his movements unsteady from alcohol and drugs. He wanted to demonstrate his dominance over the ultimate predator, to show his crew that he feared nothing and no one. Leo's reaction was immediate and devastating. The starving, stressed lion saw Damon's intrusion as an opportunity to finally strike back at his captors. The 350-pound predator launched himself at Damon with explosive power, his massive paws striking the drug dealer's chest and driving him to the concrete floor. Before Damon could scream or defend himself, Leo's jaws clamped down on his skull with crushing force. The lion's canine teeth, each over 2 inches long, punched through bone and brain tissue with sickening ease. Damon's body convulsed once as his nervous system shut down, then went completely limp in the predator's grip. But Leo wasn't finished. Years of starvation and abuse had triggered the lion's feeding instincts, and he began consuming his kill immediately. His powerful jaws tore away chunks of flesh while his claws raked across Damon's torso, opening the body cavity to access internal organs. Damon's associates screamed in horror as they watched their leader being devoured by the lion he'd kept as a status symbol. The basement filled with the sounds of tearing flesh and breaking bone as Leo fed with the desperate hunger of a chronically malnourished predator. The commotion attracted neighbors who called 911, reporting screams and gunshots from the abandoned building. Police arrived to find Damon's associates fleeing the scene, leaving behind evidence of the drug operation and the gruesome remains in the basement. SWAT officers were forced to shoot Leo when the lion refused to leave Damon's partially consumed body. The magnificent animal died protecting his first real meal in months, his natural instincts finally satisfied after years of abuse and neglect. The investigation revealed the full extent of Damon's criminal enterprise, leading to dozens of arrests and the seizure of drugs, weapons, and cash worth millions of dollars. The discovery of Leo's illegal captivity sparked outrage among animal welfare groups. Damon's funeral was sparsely attended, with only immediate family members present. His death had effectively ended his criminal organization, and former associates wanted no connection to the man who'd been killed by his own pet lion. It was October 5, 2022, off the rugged coastline of Año Nuevo State Park, California, where the Pacific Ocean meets dramatic cliffs and rocky outcroppings. This remote stretch of coast serves as critical habitat for elephant seals and harbor seals during breeding season. The area's abundant marine life creates a natural feeding ground that attracts some of the ocean's most formidable predators. Cold currents bring nutrient-rich waters close to shore, supporting massive populations of fish, seals, and sea lions. Shelby Grant, a 26-year-old graduate student in marine biology at UC Santa Barbara, was conducting independent research on great white shark behavior patterns for her doctoral thesis. Her academic confidence had convinced her that she could predict shark actions better than recreational surfers. Shelby's passionate but reckless personality often led her to take unnecessary risks that other researchers avoided. Her competitive drive to publish groundbreaking research had brought her to Año Nuevo specifically because of recent great white sightings. She maintained a modest social media presence of 4,500 followers, documenting her marine research adventures. The area was experiencing a significant boom in seal populations, which naturally attracted large predatory sharks. Recent reports from California Department of Fish and Wildlife had documented increased great white activity along this coastline, with several confirmed sightings of sharks exceeding 15 feet in length. Local surf shops had posted warnings about elevated shark presence, but Shelby's academic background made her believe she possessed superior understanding of shark behavior. Great white sharks are the ocean's apex predators, capable of reaching lengths over 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their powerful tails can propel them through water at speeds up to 35 miles per hour, while their ability to launch themselves completely out of the water demonstrates incredible power. A great white's mouth contains up to 300 serrated teeth arranged in multiple rows, each designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Their bite force can exceed 4,000 pounds per square inch, easily capable of severing human limbs. Great whites typically employ ambush tactics, attacking from below with explosive speed. At 11:30 a.m., Shelby paddled her surfboard to a position approximately 200 yards from shore where water depth reached 40 feet. When she spotted a large dorsal fin cutting through the water 50 feet away, Shelby immediately recognized it as belonging to a massive great white shark. Rather than paddling to shore, she pulled out her waterproof camera and began filming the encounter. The 16-foot shark began circling her position in increasingly tight patterns, displaying typical investigative behavior. Shelby remained motionless on her surfboard, believing her knowledge would keep her safe. The great white's circles grew progressively smaller, bringing the massive predator within 20 feet of her position. Without warning, the massive great white launched its attack from directly below. The shark's explosive vertical assault lifted both Shelby and her board partially out of the water as its enormous jaws clamped down on her left leg and the surfboard's edge simultaneously. The impact generated tremendous force as 300 razor-sharp teeth sliced through her femur, completely severing her leg at mid-thigh level. The initial bite caused catastrophic trauma as the shark's serrated teeth cut through bone, muscle, and major blood vessels with surgical precision. Her femoral artery was completely severed, causing immediate massive hemorrhaging that turned the surrounding water crimson. The shark's 4,000 psi bite force crushed her femur into multiple fragments, while its teeth created deep lacerations extending from her hip to her knee. Following typical great white behavior, the shark immediately released Shelby and disappeared beneath the surface. This bite and release pattern occurs when sharks realize humans are not their preferred prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. Shelby remained conscious but in severe shock from the massive trauma and blood loss. Despite her devastating injuries, Shelby managed to climb back onto her damaged surfboard and began paddling desperately toward shore. Blood poured continuously from the severed femoral artery, creating an expanding red trail in the water. Her weakened condition made progress extremely slow. Other surfers spotted her distress from approximately 100 yards away and immediately began paddling to assist. However, Shelby had already lost massive amounts of blood during the critical minutes following the attack. She collapsed from her surfboard just 75 yards from shore, her strength completely depleted. The responding surfers reached her within 2 minutes and immediately began applying pressure to the massive wound while supporting her in the water. They rushed her toward shore while attempting to stem the hemorrhaging, but the severed femoral artery had already caused irreversible blood loss. Emergency medical personnel met them at the shoreline and began advanced trauma procedures, but Shelby had lost too much blood. She died on the beach from hemorrhagic shock, approximately 15 minutes after the initial attack. Shelby's family released a statement honoring her dedication to marine conservation. It was March 8, 2018, in the dense mangrove swamps of Sundarban's National Park, Bangladesh, when the world's largest mangrove forest became the hunting ground for both predator and prey. The UNESCO World Heritage Site, spanning over 10,000 square kilometers across the Bay of Bengal Delta, was experiencing the height of monsoon season. Torrential rains had swollen the countless waterways that snake through the impenetrable maze of mangrove trees, creating perfect conditions for both wildlife and those who sought to exploit it. Shane McCoy, a 41-year-old American who had transitioned from wildlife photographer to illegal poacher, arrived in the Sundarbans with a singular focus on profit. His arrogant demeanor and complete disregard for local warnings had made him notorious among the fishing communities along the coast. Shane specialized in capturing rare tiger parts for the black market, driven purely by the enormous sums wealthy collectors would pay. His local guide, Rajesh Kumar, was a 38-year-old father of 3 whose desperate financial situation had forced him into working with poaching rings. Rajesh's nervous personality and intimate knowledge of the waterways made him valuable, but his sick daughter's mounting medical bills had pushed him beyond beyond moral boundaries. Forest Officer Priya Sharma, a 31-year-old dedicated anti-poaching unit leader, had been tracking Shane's illegal activities for months through informants and surveillance. The remote location Shane had chosen was notorious among locals for a massive male tiger that had killed 3 previous poachers in the same area over the past 2 years. Village elders had repeatedly warned that this particular stretch of mangrove was cursed, but Shane dismissed their superstitions as primitive nonsense. The Bengal tiger stands as one of the world's most formidable apex predators, perfectly adapted for life in the challenging mangrove environment of the Sundarbans. Adult males can weigh up to 500 pounds and measure over 9 feet in length, with powerful limbs designed for swimming through tidal waters and navigating dense vegetation. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of mangrove leaves. Bengal tigers possess incredible stealth capabilities, able to move silently through water and undergrowth while stalking prey. Their bite force reaches 1,000 pounds per square inch, delivered through 4-inch canine teeth designed to crush bone and sever spinal cords instantly. Unlike other tiger subspecies, Sundarban's tigers have adapted to be excellent swimmers and are known for their aggressive territorial behavior. These cats are ambush predators that rely on surprise attacks, often approaching from water to catch prey off guard. Shane positioned his steel jaw traps along a narrow waterway where tiger tracks were most concentrated, using a deer carcass as bait to lure his target. The illegal traps were designed to maim rather than kill instantly, ensuring the tiger would remain alive for harvesting valuable organs. As Shane worked methodically in the ankle-deep water, he remained completely unaware that a 450-pound male Bengal tiger had been silently tracking his movements for over 2 hours through the dense mangrove vegetation. The massive predator had detected Shane's scent from nearly a mile away and had been patiently following, using the natural cover of twisted roots and hanging branches to remain invisible. The tiger launched his attack from just 15 feet away, his powerful hind legs propelling his massive frame through the air with explosive force. Shane had no time to react, as 450 pounds of muscle and bone landed directly on his back, driving him face first into the muddy ground with tremendous impact. The force of the collision knocked the wind from Shane's lungs and sent his equipment scattering across the waterway. The tiger's massive jaws immediately locked around Shane's neck with devastating precision. The 4-inch canine teeth penetrated through skin and muscle, while the crushing bite force of 1,000 pounds per square inch compressed Shane's cervical vertebrae. The tiger's powerful jaw muscles applied relentless pressure, causing Shane's 3rd and 4th vertebrae to fracture with audible cracks. The spinal cord was severed instantly, cutting off all nerve signals to Shane's body below the neck. Blood began flowing rapidly from the puncture wounds as the tiger's teeth severed major arteries in Shane's neck. The massive predator maintained his grip while using his powerful forelimbs to pin Shane's torso against the muddy ground. Shane's body went completely limp as paralysis set in from the spinal cord damage, though his heart continued beating for several more minutes. The tiger then began dragging Shane's body deeper into the mangrove swamp, his powerful neck muscles easily handling the 180-pound weight. Shane's body was pulled over 200 yards through shallow water and dense vegetation before the tiger settled in a secluded area surrounded by thick mangrove roots. Within 3 minutes of the initial attack, Shane McCoy was dead from massive blood loss, cervical fracture, and spinal cord severance. The Bangladesh Forest Department launched an extensive search operation when Shane failed to return to his boat. His body was discovered 4 days later by anti-poaching patrol units. Rajesh Kumar was arrested and provided testimony about Shane's illegal activities in exchange for reduced charges. The incident sparked renewed international attention on wildlife trafficking in the Sundarbans. It was September 14, 2017, and storm clouds were gathering over the rural Oklahoma property where Dorothy and Earl Williams had spent their retirement years. The couple's modest ranch house sat on 40 acres of rolling hills and pasture, far from the nearest neighbors. Behind the house, a series of enclosures and buildings housed their most unusual family member, Buster, a 150-pound chimpanzee they'd raised from infancy for 15 years. Dorothy Williams was 68 and had never had children of her own. when she and Earl acquired Buster from a defunct research facility in 2002. She'd poured all her maternal instincts into raising the infant chimpanzee. She'd bottle-fed him, taught him sign language, and allowed him free run of their property. To Dorothy, Buster wasn't a wild animal. He was the child she'd never been able to have. Over the years, several incidents had suggested that Buster was becoming increasingly dangerous as he matured. He'd attacked a delivery driver, destroyed furniture during tantrums, and shown aggressive behavior toward strangers. But Dorothy refused to acknowledge these warning signs, insisting that Buster was just misunderstood and needed more love and attention. Earl had grown increasingly concerned about Buster's behavior, especially as the chimp entered full adulthood and displayed the territorial aggression typical of mature males. He'd suggested relocating Buster to a sanctuary, but Dorothy wouldn't hear of it. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest relatives, sharing 98% of our DNA. But that similarity makes them more dangerous, not less. Adult males can weigh up to 200 pounds and possess the strength of 5 grown men. They have long, powerful arms, opposable thumbs, and canine teeth designed for tearing flesh. Captive chimps often develop severe behavioral problems as they mature, becoming unpredictable and potentially lethal. That evening, a severe thunderstorm was approaching, with lightning flashing across the darkening sky and thunder rumbling in the distance. Buster had always been afraid of storms, and the approaching weather was making him increasingly agitated. He paced his enclosure restlessly, vocalizing his distress and showing signs of extreme anxiety. Dorothy watched Buster's distress from the house, her maternal instincts overriding Earl's warnings to stay away. She'd comforted Buster through storms before, and she couldn't bear to see him suffering alone. Despite Earl's protests, she decided to go to Buster's enclosure to calm him down. Dorothy unlocked Buster's enclosure and stepped inside, speaking in the soothing voice she'd used since he was an infant. But Buster was beyond comfort. The storm had triggered a panic response that made him view any intrusion into his territory as a threat. His 150-pound frame was tense with barely contained violence. As Dorothy approached with her arms outstretched in a gesture of comfort, Buster's fear transformed into explosive aggression. The chimpanzee launched himself at Dorothy with shocking speed, his powerful arms reaching out to grab her before she could react. Buster's first blow caught Dorothy across the face, his knuckles striking with enough force to shatter her cheekbone and knock her to the ground. Before she could scream or defend herself, the chimp was on top of her, his massive hands grabbing her arms and head with crushing strength. The chimpanzee's attack was methodical and brutal. He bit off 3 of Dorothy's fingers, his canine teeth shearing through bone and tendon with ease. His powerful hands beat her about the head and shoulders while his feet kicked at her torso, each blow delivered with the strength of 5 men. Dorothy's screams brought Earl running from the house, but when he tried to intervene, Buster turned on him as well. The chimp grabbed Earl's arm and threw him against the enclosure wall, breaking several ribs and dislocating his shoulder. Earl's injuries prevented him from helping his wife, as Buster continued his savage assault. Buster grabbed Dorothy's hair and slammed her head against the concrete floor repeatedly, causing massive skull fractures and brain trauma. The chimp's attack was driven by panic and territorial instincts that 15 years of human contact couldn't overcome. He showed no recognition of the woman who had raised him. The assault continued for several minutes before Buster finally retreated to a corner of the enclosure, his aggression spent but his agitation still evident. Dorothy lay motionless on the floor, her body broken and bloodied beyond recognition. Earl, despite his own injuries, managed to call 911 from his cell phone. Emergency responders faced a dangerous situation when they arrived. Buster was still agitated and showed aggressive behavior toward anyone who approached the enclosure. It took wildlife officials with tranquilizer equipment nearly an hour to sedate the chimp safely. Dorothy was pronounced dead at the scene, her injuries too severe for any medical intervention. She had suffered massive head trauma, multiple fractures, and severe blood loss from the bite wounds. Earl was rushed to the hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The investigation revealed that Dorothy had ignored numerous warnings about Buster's increasingly dangerous behavior. Oklahoma wildlife officials had been trying to remove the chimp for months, but Dorothy had used legal challenges to keep him on the property. Buster was euthanized the following day, despite protests from some animal rights groups. The decision was made based on public safety concerns and the severity of the attack. Dorothy's funeral was attended by neighbors and friends who remembered her kindness and dedication to animal welfare. Earl never fully recovered from his physical and emotional injuries, spending his remaining years in a nursing facility. It was April 19, 2015, in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. The spring air was mild, carrying a faint chill beneath the overcast sky. Families filled the paths of Diergaarde Blijdorp, the Rotterdam Zoo, wandering between aviaries and primate houses. And inside one enclosure, a mechanical failure and a single miscalculation would turn a usual routine into a violent incident. Martin de Vries was 42 and a senior keeper who had worked with the zoo's gorillas for more than 15 years. Known among colleagues as steady and disciplined, he had built a reputation for his calmness in handling unpredictable animals. De Vries had a methodical nature, priding himself on routine and consistency. He was not reckless, but was deeply accustomed to the rhythms of the troop, especially the dominant male, a silverback named Bakari. His long career made him a point of reference for younger staff, who often relied on him to model safe practices. His life revolved around the zoo. Unmarried, with a small apartment not far from the city center, he was the type to spend extra hours in the primate house, even after shifts ended. Co-workers said he seemed most at ease among the gorillas. That Sunday, his role was to conduct a cleaning inside the habitat, removing debris before the animals were cycled back in. For him, the task was routine. The assumption was simple. Bakari had been shifted into a secure holding pen, leaving the main enclosure empty. The decision to step inside alone was consistent with years of experience and trust in established systems. The gorilla enclosure at Rotterdam Zoo was built with rockwork, climbing structures, and grassy slopes, framed by high viewing windows where visitors gathered. Beneath its naturalistic design lay reinforced concrete, steel gates, and locking mechanisms meant to guarantee separation between humans and animals. Gorillas, though primarily herbivores, are powerful primates capable of sudden, overwhelming violence. Adult silverbacks can exceed 400 pounds, with arms nearly twice as strong as the average humans. Their bite force rivals that of large predators, and their chest-beating displays are not empty shows, but signals of dominance that can precede forceful attacks. In captivity, keepers are trained never to share direct space with them. The barrier systems, if properly engaged, are the safeguard. That morning, however, the safeguard failed. De Vries entered after signaling to a co-worker that Bakari had been locked into the holding pen. Unknown to him, a latch had malfunctioned, allowing the silverback to push back into the main enclosure. Visitors later recalled seeing the gorilla pacing along the rock wall, its broad shoulders moving with tension. De Vries, focused on clearing debris near the viewing glass, gave no sign of noticing. From the gallery, families with children watched, pointing out the keeper inside. Seconds later, Bakari emerged from behind a rock outcropping. The charge was immediate, a blur of dark muscle across the enclosure. Witnesses said the impact sounded like a heavy object slamming against wood. The gorilla struck De Vries square in the chest, both arms driving him backward into the concrete barrier. He crumpled to the ground, gasping as the air left his lungs. Bakari did not pause. He seized the keeper by the arm, lifting him as though weightless, and hurled him several feet across the floor. The sound of bone and flesh meeting concrete echoed in the enclosed space. De Vries attempted to crawl, but the gorilla was on him again. With both fists, Bakari pounded his back. Screams erupted from the gallery as parents pulled children away from the glass. De Vries's legs kicked weakly as Bakari gripped him and slammed him side to side, the motion more like violent tossing than dragging. His body snapped against the ground, limp in moments, though faint movement was still visible. The gorilla struck his head against the floor, leaving a dark pool spreading beneath him. Staff arrived within a minute, deploying fire hoses through the barriers. Jets of water lashed at the gorilla, but Bakari only tightened his grip, slamming De Vries's torso against the ground before pounding his chest and abdomen with both fists. The blows left deep indentations and visible tearing along his uniform. Witnesses said his body no longer resisted after that sequence. Tranquilizer teams fired darts, the first striking Bakari's shoulder, the second his flank. The gorilla continued its assault for nearly a minute, slamming the limp body against the floor before retreating under the growing effect of the sedative. Only then did keepers move in, pulling De Vries clear. His body showed massive trauma, multiple fractures, chest collapse, and severe head injuries. Emergency crews called by the staff arrived within minutes, but only confirmed his death. The report listed blunt force trauma to the chest and head as the cause, injuries consistent with the repeated strikes. The funeral was held in Rotterdam days later, attended by colleagues who had worked with him for decades. They remembered his patience and the care he had shown for the troop, even as they admitted the risks had always been present. The zoo issued a short statement, noting the incident as a workplace accident, and quietly reinforced the barrier systems in the primate house. The gorilla exhibit was closed for weeks, reopening only after modifications to the latch systems. It was August 17, 2017, at Shark Valley in Everglades National Park, Florida, when environmental activism collided with organized crime in one of America's most dangerous wilderness areas. The remote section of the park, located deep within the River of Grass ecosystem, stretches endlessly across sawgrass marshes and cypress swamps, teeming with prehistoric predators. Summer temperatures had soared to 95 degrees with oppressive humidity, creating perfect conditions for both wildlife activity and human vulnerability. Melanie Sloan, a 33-year-old environmental lawyer from Miami, had dedicated her career to fighting illegal development projects that threatened Florida's fragile ecosystem. Her determined and fearless approach to litigation had earned her numerous enemies among powerful construction interests, resulting in multiple death threats over the past year. Vincent Torino, known as Vinny, was a 45-year-old construction company owner whose family had ties to organized crime dating back 3 generations. His ruthless business practices and willingness to eliminate obstacles had made him wealthy, but Melanie's lawsuits threatened to cost him millions in lost contracts. Eddie Marsh, Vinny's 29-year-old nephew, served as both enforcer and guide, his extensive knowledge of the Everglades making him invaluable for disposing of problems in the vast wilderness. Eddie's violent tendencies and intimate familiarity with alligator behavior had earned him a reputation as someone who could make people disappear without a trace. The American alligator stands as one of nature's most perfectly designed killing machines, a living relic from the age of dinosaurs that has survived virtually unchanged for millions of years. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with massive heads containing jaws capable of generating bite forces exceeding 2,125 pounds per square inch. Their 80 razor-sharp teeth are designed to grip and hold prey rather than chew, with new teeth constantly replacing old ones throughout their lifetime. Alligators are ambush predators that can remain motionless for hours before exploding exploding into action with lightning speed. Their signature death roll technique involves grabbing prey and rotating rapidly to disorient victims while drowning them in shallow water. Alligators are territorial creatures that become extremely aggressive when defending their domain, particularly during mating season when males are most volatile. Eddie led Melanie to a narrow channel known among locals for its large alligator population, claiming it represented the worst example of pollution damage from nearby development. The waterway, barely 20 feet wide and surrounded by dense sawgrass, provided perfect cover for what Eddie had planned. As Melanie knelt at the water's edge to collect samples in sterile containers, she remained focused on her scientific work and completely unaware of the danger lurking beneath the murky surface. Eddie positioned himself directly behind Melanie as she worked, waiting for the perfect moment to execute his plan. With both hands placed firmly on her back, he shoved her with tremendous force into the shallow water directly above the territory of a 12-foot bull alligator that had been resting motionless on the muddy bottom. The massive alligator responded instantly to the splash and movement in his domain, his prehistoric instincts triggering an immediate attack response. The 600-pound predator launched himself upward through the water with explosive power, his massive jaws opening wide to reveal rows of gleaming teeth. The alligator's jaws clamped around Melanie's waist with devastating precision, his 2,125 pounds of bite force crushing through her lightweight field clothing and into the soft tissue beneath. The initial bite fractured several ribs and compressed vital organs, causing immediate internal bleeding and trauma. Melanie's body went rigid from the shock as the alligator's teeth penetrated deep into her abdomen. The predator immediately began his signature death roll, a technique perfected over millions of years of evolution. The alligator rotated his massive body rapidly while maintaining his grip on Melanie, the spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause drowning. The first rotation drove Melanie underwater, filling her lungs with murky swamp water as she struggled desperately to breathe. The death roll continued with relentless precision, each rotation causing additional damage to Melanie's already crushed torso. The spinning motion caused Melanie's broken ribs to puncture her lungs and liver, creating massive internal bleeding that clouded the water around them. After 3 complete rotations underwater, Melanie's struggles began to weaken as drowning and blood loss took their toll. The alligator's grip had compressed her diaphragm, making breathing impossible. Within 90 seconds of Eddie's push, Melanie Sloan was dead, her body going limp in the alligator's jaws as her heart stopped beating. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an extensive search when Melanie failed to return from her research trip. Her body was recovered 3 days later by airboat teams. Eddie Marsh was arrested after cell phone records placed him at the scene, and he eventually confessed to the murder in exchange for a plea deal. Melanie Sloan's murder proved that protecting nature can turn deadly when powerful interests feel threatened. It was January 12, 2023, at the Kibale Chimpanzee Rescue Sanctuary in the dense rainforests of western Uganda, where towering mahogany trees create a natural canopy over 30 acres of protected habitat. The facility serves as a rehabilitation center for chimpanzees rescued from illegal pet trade and bushmeat hunting. Morning mist hung heavy in the humid air as hooting calls echoed through the forest corridors. The sanctuary housed 47 rescued chimpanzees, many displaying behavioral issues from their traumatic captivity experiences. Wesley Boone, a 31-year-old veterinary student from Vancouver, had taken a gap year to gain hands-on experience with exotic animals. His compassionate but naive personality led him to anthropomorphize the chimpanzees, treating them more like intelligent humans than wild animals capable of extreme violence. Wesley's inexperience with primate behavior, combined with his overconfidence in animal handling skills, created a dangerous combination. He had been volunteering at the sanctuary for 3 months, documenting his experiences for his modest Instagram following of 3,200 followers. His desire to capture compelling content had driven him to seek increasingly close interactions, despite strict facility protocols prohibiting direct contact. The The sanctuary's most challenging resident was Caesar, a 150-pound adult male chimpanzee rescued from illegal captivity 2 years earlier. Caesar had been kept as a pet until he became too aggressive for his captors to handle. His history of abuse had left him with severe behavioral problems, including sudden violent outbursts triggered by direct eye contact, perceived challenges to his dominance, or unexpected movements. Staff members had repeatedly warned volunteers about Caesar's unpredictable nature and the strict protocols requiring barriers between humans and adult males. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing 98% of human DNA, but they possess physical capabilities that far exceed human strength and aggression. Adult male chimpanzees can weigh up to 200 pounds and possess arm strength 5 times greater than humans. Their canine teeth can reach lengths of 2 inches, designed for tearing flesh and establishing dominance through violence. Even hand-raised chimps retain their capacity for explosive violence, with attacks often targeting faces, hands, and genitals to inflict maximum damage. Their incredible grip strength can crush bones, while their speed makes escape nearly impossible. At 2:45 p.m., Wesley made the fatal decision to enter Caesar's enclosure while the large male appeared to be resting peacefully. He had observed Caesar for weeks and believed he understood the chimp's behavioral patterns well enough to predict safe interaction opportunities. Wesley quietly slipped through the enclosure gate, his phone ready to capture what he hoped would be an impressive selfie demonstrating his bond with the rescued primate. Caesar initially remained motionless as Wesley approached, sitting approximately 20 feet away near the back wall. The chimp's relaxed posture gave Wesley false confidence that the interaction would remain peaceful. As Wesley raised his phone and moved closer for the perfect shot, he made direct eye contact with Caesar while extending the device toward both of them. The eye contact triggered Caesar's aggressive response instantly. In chimpanzee social hierarchy, direct staring represents a challenge to dominance that demands violent retaliation. Caesar's hair stood on end as he bared his massive canine teeth and emitted a threatening scream. The attack began with explosive speed as Caesar charged across the enclosure, covering the distance in less than 3 seconds. His powerful arms grabbed Wesley's face with crushing force, his fingers digging into the soft tissue around his eyes and cheeks. Caesar's incredible grip strength immediately began crushing the delicate bones of Wesley's facial structure. Caesar's 2-inch canine teeth tore into Wesley's throat with surgical precision, puncturing his trachea and severing his carotid artery in one devastating bite. Blood immediately began pouring from the massive wound as Wesley's airway filled with fluid, preventing him from screaming. The chimp's powerful jaws maintained their grip on his throat while his hands continued crushing Wesley's face and skull. The frenzied assault continued as Caesar bit off 2 of Wesley's fingers and tore away large sections of his scalp and left ear. The chimp's attacks were rapid and brutal, targeting the most vulnerable areas with devastating efficiency. Caesar's incredible strength allowed him to shake Wesley violently while maintaining his crushing grip. The violence lasted approximately 45 seconds before Caesar suddenly stopped attacking and retreated to the far corner of the enclosure. This abrupt cessation is typical of chimpanzee aggression, where explosive attacks end as quickly as they begin once dominance is established. Wesley collapsed to the concrete floor, his crushed windpipe preventing normal breathing, while massive blood loss from his severed carotid artery caused rapid deterioration. The combination of asphyxiation and hemorrhaging proved immediately fatal. He died within 2 minutes, his body showing extensive facial trauma, missing digits, and catastrophic throat injuries. Sanctuary staff discovered Wesley's body during the afternoon feeding routine 15 minutes later. Caesar remained in the corner, showing no further aggression, but clearly agitated. Ugandan wildlife authorities launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols and volunteer supervision procedures. Wesley Boone's story demonstrated how humanity's closest relatives can turn lethal when their behavioral triggers are misunderstood. If you found these cases shocking, click the next video for more dangerous animal encounters that ended in disaster. It was November 3rd, 2018, at the primarily primate sanctuary in San Antonio, Texas, when years of cruelty and abuse finally reached a breaking point that would shock the animal welfare community. The 78-acre private facility, nestled in the rolling hills outside the city, housed over 300 rescued primates in what appeared to be a legitimate sanctuary operation. However, beneath the surface lurked a dark reality of mistreatment and outdated training methods that had gone unchecked for years. Garrett Flynn, a 39-year-old sanctuary owner and former circus trainer, had built his reputation on dominance-based animal control methods that belonged to a bygone era. His cruel and abusive treatment of the primates under his care had become legendary among staff members, who witnessed daily acts of violence disguised as training. Garrett's use of electric prods, food deprivation, and physical intimidation had created an atmosphere of fear throughout the facility. Dr. Lisa Park, a 44-year-old primatologist, had filed multiple complaints with Texas Parks and Wildlife regarding Garrett's treatment of the chimps, documenting instances of abuse that violated every ethical standard. Bobby Morrison, known as Tank, was a 31-year-old former employee who had been fired 6 months earlier for reporting animal abuse to state authorities. The evening of November 3rd found Garrett alone at the sanctuary, having dismissed all staff early to avoid witnesses to his increasingly violent training sessions. Chimpanzees represent one of humanity's closest genetic relatives, sharing over 98% of our DNA, but possessing physical capabilities that far exceed human limitations. Adult male chimps can weigh up to 150 pounds and possess strength 5 to 7 times greater than an average human. Their powerful arms can exert tremendous force, capable of tearing limbs from bodies with ease. Chimpanzees have large canine teeth, measuring up to 2 inches in length, perfectly designed for inflicting devastating bite wounds. These highly intelligent primates possess complex social structures and long memories, particularly when it comes to perceived threats or abuse. In captivity, chimps can become extremely aggressive when mistreated, often coordinating attacks in groups to overwhelm perceived enemies. Unlike many animals, chimpanzees can hold grudges for years and will actively seek opportunities for revenge. Garrett entered the main habitat enclosure carrying his signature electric prod, a weapon he had used countless times to intimidate and control the 6 adult chimpanzees housed in the facility's largest compound. As Garrett stepped through the reinforced gate, Caesar, the 150-pound alpha male, immediately recognized the electric prod and let out a series of warning screams that alerted the entire troop to the perceived threat. The attack began with coordinated precision that demonstrated the chimp's intelligence and planning capabilities. Caesar charged directly at Garrett from the front, while 2 adult females, Luna and Kira, flanked him from both sides. The simultaneous assault overwhelmed Garrett's ability to defend himself or retreat to safety. Caesar's powerful arms wrapped around Garrett's torso, his incredible strength allowing him to lift the 180-pound man off the ground with ease. Caesar's massive canine teeth immediately clamped down on Garrett's right shoulder, penetrating through his thick jacket and into the muscle tissue beneath. The bite force, estimated at over 1,300 pounds per square inch, crushed bone and severed major blood vessels. Blood began flowing rapidly from the puncture wounds as Caesar shook his head violently, tearing additional tissue and expanding the wound. Luna attacked Garrett's left arm, her powerful jaws closing around his wrist with devastating force. The crushing bite fractured both the radius and ulna bones, while her teeth severed tendons and arteries. Kira focused her assault on Garrett's legs, using her incredible strength to tear at his clothing and expose vulnerable flesh beneath. The coordinated attack continued as the chimps used their superior strength to systematically dismember their victim. Caesar released his grip on Garrett's shoulder, only to grab his left hand, using his powerful arms to twist and pull until the fingers separated with sickening pops. Luna and Kira worked together to remove Garrett's shoes before beginning to tear off his toes with their teeth and hands. The most devastating injury occurred when Caesar's massive jaws closed around Garrett's throat throat, his canine teeth puncturing the carotid artery and crushing the windpipe. The combination of massive blood loss and inability to breathe created a fatal scenario. Within 10 minutes, Garrett Flynn was dead from multiple traumatic injuries, massive blood loss, and asphyxiation. The discovery of Garrett's body the following morning triggered an immediate investigation by local authorities and animal welfare organizations. The sanctuary was permanently closed, and the surviving chimps were relocated to accredited facilities. Bobby Morrison was questioned but never charged, as investigators concluded the chimps had acted independently. It was September 7, 2014, in Phoenix, Arizona. The morning heat had already settled in, carrying the dry weight of late summer across the desert city. Families filtered into the Phoenix Zoo, moving from shaded paths to observation areas, expecting routine displays of animals going about their day. Few could have imagined that within one of those exhibits, a lapse in procedure would end with tragedy witnessed in real time. Laura Mitchell was 29, a zookeeper who had worked at the Phoenix Zoo for 6 years. She had gravitated to exotic cats early in her career, drawn to their power and independence. Colleagues regarded her as competent and committed, someone who cared deeply about enrichment and feeding routines. Mitchell was deliberate in her work, but not without small risks, habits born of repetition. Her confidence with the jaguar, in particular, sometimes led her to treat tasks around the enclosure with less caution than the formal guidelines demanded. Her life outside the zoo was quiet. She lived in a modest apartment near Tempe, drove an aging sedan, and rarely missed her early morning shifts. Mitchell saw her work as more than a job. It was a responsibility to maintain the health and behavior of animals most people would only glimpse behind glass. On that September morning, her goal was simple: adjust a feeding platform and prepare meat for the jaguar's mid-morning feed. It was the sort of routine she had carried out dozens of times, familiar enough to feel safe. The jaguar exhibit was designed with sandy ground, climbing logs, and a shaded pool where the animal sometimes rested. To visitors, it resembled a fragment of jungle transplanted into the desert, though the heat was sharper and drier than the species' natural environment. That morning, children pressed their hands against the viewing glass, waiting for the animal to appear. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, averaging 200 to 250 pounds, with males capable of exceeding that. They possess one of the strongest bite forces of any big cat, powerful enough to pierce turtle shells and crush bone. In captivity, keepers are trained to use secure shifts and barriers during feeding, as direct proximity to the animal is never considered safe. Even well fed, their instinct to ambush and overpower remains intact. Warnings were present. Mitchell's co-workers had occasionally reminded her not to leave gates half-latched, a small shortcut she used when moving between spaces. On this day, visitors later reported seeing the jaguar pacing more than usual, tail flicking as it moved near the barrier. The heat may have heightened its agitation. Despite these cues, Mitchell entered the secondary holding pen without fully engaging the gate lock, believing she could quickly adjust the feeding platform before opening the chute for meat. Her focus was on efficiency, not the potential hazard just behind the barrier. From the observation area, families watched as she bent near the platform. The half-latched gate shifted slightly, leaving a narrow gap. Within seconds, the jaguar lunged forward, exploiting the opening. The impact was sudden. 220 pounds of muscle and claws slamming into Mitchell, knocking her flat against the hard surface of the pen floor. Screams rose from the crowd as the cat clamped its jaws onto her thigh, dragging her backward. Mitchell's voice carried across the enclosure, sharp cries breaking as the animal shook her leg violently. The jaguar reared back and bit into her abdomen, teeth sinking into soft tissue. Witnesses described her body arching under the pressure, her arms pushing weakly at the animal's head. The sound of tearing fabric mixed with the guttural growls reverberating inside the pen. Staff rushed from nearby enclosures. One keeper sprayed a fire extinguisher through the barrier, the hiss of gas clouding the air. The jaguar resisted, dragging Mitchell several feet. Her movements slowed as the animal's claws raked her midsection, opening deep gashes. The crowd outside wailed, parents pulling their children back from the glass, some covering their faces. A high-pressure hose was brought in, water blasting against the cat's body. The force startled it enough to release her, retreating briefly toward the corner. Mitchell lay motionless. Keepers rushed in to drag her clear of the enclosure, lifting her onto a stretcher, while one of them called 911. By the time paramedics arrived, she showed no signs of responsiveness. The wounds to her abdomen and thigh had caused massive blood loss. Despite emergency attempts, she was pronounced dead on sight. The autopsy later documented multiple deep lacerations, a severed femoral artery, and extensive abdominal trauma consistent with a large animal attack. Cause of death was listed as exsanguination due to jaguar-inflicted injuries. Her funeral was private, attended mostly by family and co-workers. Among zoo staff, the loss was described as preventable, a result of small shortcuts that became habit over time. The Phoenix Zoo was fined for safety lapses, and reinforced standards were put in place requiring double checks on barriers for all big cat enclosures. The jaguar exhibit reopened weeks later, unchanged in appearance. It was July 19, 2015, and the Texas heat was brutal even as evening approached, with temperatures still hovering near 100 degrees across the sprawling ranch outside Houston. The Martinez family's 500-acre property stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, dotted with oil derricks that had made them wealthy beyond imagination. Behind the main house, a series of custom-built enclosures housed an exotic menagerie that would make most zoos envious. Ashley Martinez was 22 and had never been told no in her entire life. The daughter of oil baron Roberto Martinez, she'd grown up with every privilege money could buy: private schools, European vacations, and the unshakable belief that wealth could solve any problem. 3 years earlier, she'd convinced her father to purchase Raja, a Bengal tiger cub, after seeing one at a private exotic animal auction in Dallas. Ashley had bottle-fed Raja from 6 weeks old, spending countless hours playing with him as he grew from a playful cub into a magnificent 400-pound predator. She genuinely believed their bond transcended the normal human-animal relationship, often telling visitors that Raja was more like a dog than a wild animal. Her father had hired exotic animal experts to advise on Raja's care, but Ashley consistently ignored their warnings about the tiger's increasingly dangerous behavior. The ranch hands had noticed changes in Raja over the past 6 months. The tiger had been displaying more territorial behavior, pacing his enclosure aggressively and showing signs of sexual maturity that made him unpredictable. Several experts had recommended relocating Raja to a professional facility, but Ashley refused to consider separating from her baby. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with males weighing up to 500 pounds and possessing bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. Despite being hand-raised, they retain all their wild instincts and become increasingly dangerous as they reach sexual maturity around age 3. Their hunting instincts are hardwired into their DNA, and no amount of human contact can eliminate their predatory nature. That evening, Ashley was making her daily visit to Raja's enclosure, carrying fresh water and planning to spend time with him as she did every day. The tiger's habitat was impressive. Nearly an acre of fenced area with trees, a pond, and various enrichment features. But no amount of space could change what Raja fundamentally was: an apex predator designed by evolution to kill. Ashley unlocked the enclosure gate and stepped inside, calling out to Raja in the baby talk voice she'd used since he was a cub. The tiger emerged from the shade of a large oak tree, his massive frame moving with fluid grace. At 3 years old and 400 pounds, Raja was in his prime, a magnificent specimen with piercing amber eyes and distinctive black stripes across his golden coat. What Ashley failed to notice were the subtle signs that Raja's behavior had fundamentally changed. His ears were slightly flattened, his tail twitched with agitation, and his gaze held a predatory intensity she'd never seen before. The tiger's sexual maturity had triggered territorial and hunting instincts that overrode years of human conditioning. Ashley bent down to fill Raja's water bowl, turning her back on the tiger in a gesture of trust that would prove fatal. The movement triggered Raja's hunting instincts. The sight of prey bending over activated millions of years of evolutionary programming that no amount of bottle feeding could suppress. Raja launched himself at Ashley with explosive power, covering the 15 feet between them in a single bound. His massive paws struck her between the shoulder blades, driving her face first into the dirt. Before she could scream or struggle, Raja's jaws clamped down on the back of her neck with crushing force. The tiger's canine teeth, each over 2 inches long, punched through Ashley's cervical vertebrae like they were made of paper. Her spinal cord severed instantly, ending her life in less than 3 seconds. Raja's powerful jaw muscles contracted, ensuring the kill was complete before he released his grip and stepped back. Raja grabbed Ashley's lifeless body by the shoulder and began dragging her toward a corner of the enclosure, following the same behavior patterns his wild ancestors had used for millions of years. He positioned the body in a secluded spot and began the territorial guarding behavior typical of big cats protecting their kill. Ashley's absence wasn't noticed until she failed to appear for dinner 3 hours later. Roberto Martinez went looking for his daughter, following the path to Raja's enclosure that she walked every evening. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Raja was lying beside Ashley's body in the corner of the enclosure, occasionally licking at the wounds while maintaining the alert posture of a predator guarding his prey. The tiger showed no recognition of Roberto's presence, treating him as a potential threat to his kill. Local authorities arrived within an hour, but there was nothing they could do for Ashley. Sheriff's deputies were forced to shoot Raja when the tiger refused to leave Ashley's body, showing aggressive behavior toward anyone who approached. The investigation revealed that Ashley had been warned repeatedly about Raja's changing behavior, but had dismissed expert advice as unnecessary caution. The Martinez family faced no criminal charges, as Texas law allowed private ownership of exotic animals with proper permits. Ashley's funeral was attended by hundreds of friends and family members who remembered her vibrant personality and love of animals. Roberto Martinez donated millions to wildlife conservation organizations, hoping his daughter's death might prevent others from making the same fatal mistake. It was August 22, 2021, in the remote backcountry of Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, where vast wilderness stretches across 2.2 million acres of untamed landscape. The Pelican Valley area serves as prime grizzly bear habitat during late summer berry season. Rolling hills covered in huckleberry bushes provide essential food sources for bears preparing for winter hibernation. The morning air carried the crisp scent of pine and distant elk bugles. Darren Cole, a 42-year-old IT consultant from Portland, had recently separated from his wife and sought solace in solo wilderness adventures. His weekend hiking trips had evolved into increasingly ambitious backcountry expeditions, fueled by an overconfident personality developed through years of incident-free outdoor experiences. Darren's stubborn nature and belief in his wilderness skills had made him dismissive of park safety guidelines, particularly regarding wildlife wildlife encounters. He adventured into Pelican Valley specifically because of recent grizzly sightings, hoping to photograph bears for his modest social media following of 3,800 outdoor enthusiasts. His expensive camera equipment and determination to capture unique wildlife images had driven him deeper into restricted areas than most visitors dared to explore. The late August timing coincided with peak bear activity, as grizzlies frantically consumed thousands of calories daily to prepare for winter denning. Female bears with cubs became especially protective during this critical feeding period, viewing any potential threat as a danger to their offspring's survival. Park rangers had posted warnings about increased bear activity throughout the backcountry, but Darren's confidence led him to ignore these advisories. Grizzly bears are North America's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 400 pounds and males reaching 800 pounds. Their powerful limbs can propel them at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour, while their 4-inch claws and massive jaw muscles make them capable of crushing bones with ease. A grizzly's bite force reaches 1,200 pounds per square inch, easily capable of crushing a human skull. Despite their bulk, grizzlies possess surprising agility and can navigate steep terrain with remarkable ease. Mother bears with cubs display extreme protective behavior, attacking perceived threats with devastating ferocity. At 2:15 p.m., Darren spotted a female grizzly with 2 yearling cubs foraging in a berry-rich meadow approximately 200 yards away. The 350-pound sow appeared focused on feeding, methodically stripping berries from bushes while her cubs played nearby. Darren immediately began photographing from his initial distance, but the lighting conditions failed to meet his perfectionist standards. He gradually moved closer, stopping periodically to capture images while the bear family continued feeding. The sow began displaying stress signals as Darren approached within 100 yards, huffing sounds, jaw popping, and swaying her massive head from side to side. These warning behaviors escalated when he reached 75 yards, but Darren misinterpreted them as normal bear behavior rather than clear threat displays. His movement pattern inadvertently positioned him between the mother and one of her cubs, triggering her protective instincts. When Darren advanced to within 50 yards for better photographic angles, the situation reached a critical threshold. One yearling cub wandered behind Darren's position, effectively trapping the human between the protective mother and her offspring. The sow's demeanor changed instantly from cautious awareness to explosive aggression. The grizzly charged at full speed, covering the 50-yard distance in less than 4 seconds. Her massive paws thundered against the ground as she closed the gap with terrifying velocity. Darren fumbled desperately for his bear spray, but the canister remained clipped to his backpack as the 350-pound predator struck him with tremendous force. The sow's initial blow came from her massive front paws, her 4-inch claws raking across Darren's chest and face. The impact knocked him backward onto the ground, opening deep gashes from his collarbone to his sternum. Blood immediately began flowing from the parallel claw marks as the bear's razor-sharp talons tore through muscle and tissue. Her second strike targeted his head, her powerful jaws clamping down on his skull with crushing force. The grizzly's bite generated over 1,200 pounds per square inch of pressure, fracturing Darren's skull and causing immediate brain trauma. Her canine teeth, each over an inch long, punctured through his scalp and penetrated the bone beneath. She shook him violently, the motion causing additional fractures to his cervical vertebrae and severe damage to his brain stem. The mauling continued for approximately 90 seconds as the protective mother ensured the threat to her cubs was completely eliminated. She struck repeatedly with her claws, opening his abdomen and exposing internal organs, while her powerful jaws delivered crushing bites to his torso and limbs. When Darren's movements ceased, the sow delivered one final bite to his neck before retreating to gather her cubs. Darren died from massive head trauma and blood loss within minutes of the attack's conclusion. The combination of skull fractures, brain damage, and severe hemorrhaging from multiple wounds proved immediately fatal. His body was discovered 4 hours later by park rangers. Yellowstone National Park officials launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing Darren's hiking permits and circumstances leading to the encounter. It was November 2nd, 2013, in Kolkata, India. The morning was warm and damp. the kind of late autumn day when the air still carried the weight of summer. Families filled the Alipore zoological gardens, children tugging at their parents' hands toward the tiger enclosures. On the schedule was a public feeding demonstration, a routine event meant to show the animal's strength from a controlled distance. What unfolded instead left a permanent scar on both staff and visitors. Rakesh Banerjee was 41, a veteran keeper with more than a decade of experience at the zoo. He was known for his steady manner and his ability to keep demonstrations calm before large crowds. Over the years, he had developed a reputation for smooth presentations, rarely rattled by restless animals or noisy visitors. Colleagues described him as dependable, someone who took pride in showing the zoo as a safe place for families. But his long familiarity sometimes led him to cut small corners, trusting his instincts more than strict adherence to protocol. Banerjee's daily habits were precise. He arrived before sunrise, checked the big cat enclosures, and prepared the food with care. He had no interest in media attention, though demonstrations placed him in public view. For him, the work was about showing visitors that the animals were not monsters, but powerful creatures to be respected. On this particular day, his motivation was the same as always. Conduct the demonstration smoothly, keep the crowd engaged, and finish his rounds before the afternoon heat set in. Entering the enclosure briefly to adjust the feeding platform was not standard procedure, but it was something he had done before when he judged it safe. The tiger enclosure was a wide, grassy pit bordered by tall rock walls, with shaded areas where the animals could retreat from the sun. From the public gallery above, visitors could look down through reinforced barriers at the striped cats below. Bengal tigers are among the largest cats in the world, males weighing up to 500 pounds and equipped with claws that can pierce flesh in a single swipe. Their bite force, exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, allows them to crush bone as easily as muscle. Though captive-born, zoo tigers retain the instincts of ambush predators. Keepers are trained never to turn their backs and never to enter enclosures without animals securely locked away. That morning, warning signs were visible. One of the tigers, a large male, paced restlessly along the edge of the rock wall, its tail lashing in short, sharp movements. Some staff noted the agitation and suggested waiting until the animal calmed. Visitors near the front observed the tiger's repeated circling, whispering uneasily to each other. Banerjee appeared unconcerned. He stepped into the secondary space to adjust a feeding tray, confident the demonstration would continue without issue. Witnesses later recalled how quickly the sequence unraveled. Banerjee had turned his back, bending to collect meat from a bucket when the tiger lunged. The cat cleared the short distance in an instant, claws raking across his back as it pulled him down. Witnesses reported hearing a heavy thud and Banerjee's cry as the tiger struck, though most later admitted the details blurred in panic. The tiger clamped its jaws into his neck and chest, shaking him with violent force. Banerjee struggled briefly, his arms pushing weakly against the massive head before going slack. The animal dragged him several feet, paws leaving deep impressions in the soil before pinning him under its weight. Keepers rushed with poles and tools, slamming them against the barriers to distract the animal. The tiger responded with another shake, its teeth sinking deeper, muscle and bone tearing audibly. His body jerked with the motion, then lay motionless. Staff deployed fire extinguishers, white spray filling the air, but the animal did not release until another keeper blasted it with a high-pressure hose. Even then, the tiger backed away slowly, its muzzle soaked dark red, its eyes locked on the still figure on the ground. The entire attack lasted less than a minute. Visitors who had remained described it as feeling far longer, the sequence unfolding in brutal clarity. Banerjee's uniform was shredded. His chest and neck bore crushing injuries consistent with the tiger's bite. leaving him unresponsive within seconds. His face was turned toward the gallery, but there was no sign of recognition in his expression. When the enclosure was secured, medics called by staff entered immediately. They found no pulse. Blood loss had been massive, compounded by catastrophic crushing injuries to the chest and neck. The funeral was held in Kolkata days later, attended by family, colleagues, and a small group of long-time zoo visitors who had known Banerjee from years of demonstrations. The zoo suspended all public feeding demonstrations permanently. The tigers were moved to reinforced enclosures, their access restricted during any keeper presence. Authorities classified the case as a workplace accident and ordered an internal review, but no criminal charges were filed. It was November 11, 2013, and the Montana winter was settling in early, with snow already covering the peaks of the surrounding mountains and temperatures dropping below freezing at night. Helen Kowalski's remote cabin sat in a valley 20 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense forest that stretched for miles in every direction. The isolation that had once brought her peace was now filled with the presence of Bruno, a 400-pound black bear who had become her unlikely companion. Helen Kowalski was 71 and had been living alone since her husband's death 3 years earlier. The retired schoolteacher had moved to the Montana wilderness seeking solitude, but the loneliness had proven harder to bear than she'd expected. When Bruno first appeared at her property 2 years ago, scavenging for food scraps, Helen had seen an opportunity for companionship that gradually evolved into a dangerous obsession. What had started as occasional food offerings had become daily feedings, with Helen providing Bruno with everything from table scraps to specially purchased meat. She'd grown to view the massive bear as her friend and protector, talking to him during his visits and finding comfort in his presence. Wildlife officials had warned her repeatedly about the dangers of feeding wild bears, but Helen dismissed their concerns as government interference. Bruno had become completely dependent on Helen's feedings, losing his natural fear of humans and his ability to forage effectively. The 400-pound bear now spent most of his time near Helen's cabin, waiting for his daily meals, and becoming increasingly aggressive when food wasn't provided on schedule. His natural hibernation patterns had been disrupted by the artificial food source, keeping him active well into the winter months. Black bears are powerful predators despite their smaller size compared to grizzlies, with adult males weighing up to 600 pounds and possessing crushing jaw strength. When habituated to human food sources, they lose their natural fear and become dangerous, viewing humans as either food providers or competitors for resources. Their powerful claws and teeth can inflict fatal injuries, and their unpredictable nature makes them extremely hazardous to be around. That evening, Helen had fallen in her kitchen while preparing Bruno's usual meal, injuring her leg and delaying the feeding by several hours. Bruno had been waiting outside her cabin, growing increasingly agitated as his expected mealtime passed. The bear's hunger and frustration were building to dangerous levels, but Helen didn't understand the risk she faced. When Bruno's patience finally ran out, he used his powerful claws to tear through the cabin's screen door, following the scent of food into Helen's kitchen. The 400-pound bear moved through her home with surprising grace, his nose leading him toward the refrigerator where Helen stored his food. Helen heard the commotion and emerged from her bedroom, moving slowly due to her injured leg. Instead of retreating to safety and calling for help, she tried to appease Bruno by offering him food from her kitchen, not understanding that getting between a hungry bear and his expected meal was potentially fatal. Bruno's frustration exploded into violence when Helen moved too slowly to provide the food he expected. The bear's powerful paw struck her across the chest, his claws raking through her clothing and flesh with devastating effect. The impact lifted Helen off her feet and sent her crashing into her kitchen cabinets. Before Helen could recover or call for help, Bruno was on top of her, his massive weight pinning her to the floor. The bear's jaws clamped down on her shoulder and neck, his teeth punching through muscle and bone with crushing force. Helen's screams echoed through the empty cabin as Bruno continued his assault. The bear's attack was driven by hunger and frustration rather than predatory instincts, but the result was equally deadly. Bruno's powerful jaws worked methodically, crushing Helen's ribcage and puncturing vital organs. Her struggles grew weaker as shock and blood loss overwhelmed her system. Bruno eventually lost interest in Helen's motionless body and turned his attention to the refrigerator, using his claws to tear open the door and access the food inside. The bear spent the next several hours feeding in Helen's kitchen, completely indifferent to the woman who had considered him her friend. Helen's body wasn't discovered for 3 days, when a neighbor became concerned about her absence and drove to the remote cabin to check on her. The neighbor found Bruno still in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of his feeding frenzy and Helen's remains. Wildlife officials were called to remove Bruno, but the bear showed no fear of humans and had to be euthanized for public safety. The investigation revealed Helen's long history of feeding the bear, despite repeated warnings from authorities. Helen's funeral was attended by former students and colleagues who remembered her dedication to education and her love of nature. Her death sparked renewed efforts to educate the public about the dangers of feeding wild animals, with wildlife officials using her story as a cautionary tale. The remote cabin was eventually sold and demolished, but the tragedy served as a stark reminder that wild animals can never truly be tamed, no matter how much affection humans might feel for them. Thanks for watching. Just when you think love and familiarity can bridge the gap between humans and wild animals, we're just getting started.